Welcome to Africa 360. We're the program that brings you news and views from Africa, of course, from every angle. I'm Chris Maralang, and this is Africa 360. The United States and South Africa, a relationship that is centuries old. The first U.S. consulate opened in Cape Town in 1789. There have been highs and lows, among them the CIA's role in the arrest of Nelson Mandela and the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act in 1986. Most recently, President Barack Obama's visit to South Africa confirmed the two countries remain close. But how do we ensure that that relationship benefits both states? I spoke to America's new ambassador to South Africa, Patrick Gaspard. Take a look. Ambassador Gaspard, thank you so much for joining us on Africa 360.
Chris, thank you so very much for having me on. I've been looking forward to this.
You were here previously about 20 years ago. What brought you to South Africa?
Well, I came here a full year after Nelson Mandela had been released from Robben Island. In the year prior, he came and visited the United States, and because I had been active with the anti-apartheid movement and labor in the States and with our government, I got to participate in that visit in a meaningful way. And then a year later, I came with a delegation headed by former mayor of New York City, David Dinkins. We came to lend our support to the nascent democracy and to make clear that those who were striving for freedom and justice in South Africa had broad international solidarity on their side, and that we would continue to do all that we could.
Indeed, and it is those close links to the African continent that has really raised interest, particularly on the African continent, around the current U.S. administration that you represent under President Barack Obama, because he too has African heritage. But there is a bit of bittersweetness in that many of the critics of U.S. government policy, particularly under President Obama, say not much has changed.
Well, Chris, first thing I would do is point you to the historic moment that happened just a few short weeks ago when President Mandela transitioned. And we had not only President Obama, but former Presidents Clinton, Carter, and Bush, and 20 members of Congress all come to not only pay respects, but to reaffirm our commitment to the people of South Africa and to the great vision of Madiba. So there's a lasting connection and a lasting legacy that we are driving forward on. And I would dare say that a lot of the young people who I've met in this country, a lot of the activists, the mamas who are in the townships, who are working with USAID through our PEPFAR program, who are working with the U.S. every single day to save lives and to work towards an AIDS-free generation, would say to you, Chris, that there's nothing bittersweet about it. A tremendous amount has been accomplished and continues to be accomplished. Well, and I could go on and on and on about that partnership.
I'm sure you could have, Mr. Ambassador, but I think what I was referring to here is the very fact that I think the expectation was that Africa, in terms of policy orientation, with regards to the government that you represent here in South Africa, would begin to take center stage, given your background and, of course, President Obama's. This hasn't happened, has it, sir?
Well, you know, I like to think that I've enjoyed a special relationship with President Obama, and the fact that he sent me to be the United States representative to South Africa, I like to believe is not insignificant and would suggest that it has some real import for this president going forward. And Chris, let's be realistic about the global moment that we find ourselves in. When Barack Obama took office in January of 2009, all of us, the United States, South Africa, all the world's nations, were absolutely reeling from the financial collapse in the fall of 2008. And President Obama rightly focused on doing all that he could to right balance our economy in the United States and to work with leading democracies to make certain that workers had the protections that they needed, that credit was flowing again, and that we were once again creating jobs. And we've done that not only in the U.S., but that's had tremendous benefit here in the sub-Saharan region, and certainly here in South Africa.
The African Growth and Opportunity Act is a credit to African and U.S. relations. The umbrella agreement was designed to encourage African states to enter the international market. Oil exporters like Nigeria and Angola are just some of the countries who have reaped the rewards of the 15-year program. Manufacturing saw a boom, and South Africa's automotive industry grew with increased exports to the United States. But AGOA is not a shield to protect Africa's nascent industries. The textile industry simply couldn't compete against cheaper mass producers like those in China. And the program's benefits are not without condition. Participating countries are assessed annually. Their records on workers' rights, their commitment to a market-based economy, and to democratization are all scrutinized. And AGOA is not permanent. The act expires next year, leaving African countries asking, what now? The reality, sir, is that we haven't really seen an economic macro picture coming from the Barack Obama administration that talks about moving away from simple aid towards real trade initiatives that are far removed from AGOA.
Well, actually, I would beg to differ. President Obama, when he was here in conversations with President Zuma and then in public during his town hall meetings, talked about the ways in which our economies are intertwined, talked about the fact that our economic relationship with South Africa and with the region is not one that's based on charity, but based on mutual interest and investment as well. Just a few weeks ago, I met with American private equity fund managers and fund managers here in South Africa who are talking about opportunities for South Africans to invest in the U.S. economy and U.S. Infrastructure, and that's absolutely been two ways. And on the question of AGOA, Chris, let's not just kind of breeze past that and act as if it's a small, insignificant footprint. It has profound impact on the economy here in South Africa. I spent some time out in Port Elizabeth, and I met with South Africans who are employed now and who are part of a growing manufacturing sector because of AGOA and because of the opportunities that exist for your vehicles that are manufactured here to be transported to the U.S. duty-free and sold there. So it's grown up many, many jobs here, and I know that that's going to continue to be the case.
Doing background on you, I also noted that you...
Don't tell me you've been Googling.
I have been. An estimated 30,000 Americans now call South Africa home. The two countries enjoy a rich cultural exchange. In addition, the USA and South Africa have cooperated on the battlefield. They work together in the Great Lakes region, and since 2013, over 2,000 South African military personnel have trained with their American counterparts. But South Africa isn't the US's only Africa ally. The African Command, or AFRICOM, has various bases across the continent. So what's in it for Africa? Mr. Ambassador, I was fascinated watching your Senate hearing, and this is where most ambassadors get confirmed into the position that they're supposed to enter. Now, one of the things that was said during the Senate hearing was that South Africa is viewed as a key strategic partner. Can you elaborate on why the U.S. government sees South Africa as a strategic partner?
I think particularly as we come out of a period where rightly, security concerns are more and more on the minds of average citizens, particularly if you look at situations like the Westgate Mall, for instance. It's clear that we all need to be as diligent as we can possibly be against violent and extreme organizations. The level of cooperation that's existed between South Africa and the United States on that front is really unprecedented and is setting a pattern throughout the region. Clearly, I think that South Africa continues to be a real point of entry on African trade issues and broader democratization issues here in the continent as well. Not that long ago, there were joint exercises that were conducted out in the Cape on humanitarian relief here in the continent. When you consider the capacity of South Africa's military forces, when you consider the equipment, the resources, and some of the leadership capacity that the U.S. has, there's a lot that we have done and can continue to do jointly on emergency relief efforts throughout the continent. And the last point, one need look no further than the country of my birth, the Congo, to see how South Africa's recent leadership and interventions have really helped to bring a tremendous amount of stability.
At the same time, Ambassador, a lot of concerns have been directed towards the administration here in South Africa currently, particularly around economic policy. And we also noted that you come from a very strong union background. Recently, out in Marikana, we saw union or labor disputes escalating or de-escalating into violence. Does this concern the United States? And what is the position of your government and, of course, the perception of investors coming from the United States?
Well, I think that we all continue to absolutely be convinced that growth and opportunity on this entire continent is largely dependent on the kind of leadership role that South Africa needs to continue to play moving forward. Growth and opportunity here in South Africa is dependent on the contract, the covenant that exists between government and the workforce and with private industry. And when that conversation, that covenant breaks down, when there's a lack of transparency, when there's a lack of predictability, that's certainly not good for industry and is problematic for the workforce as well, and creates a bit of a chilling effect for the investment community. Of course, one has to be concerned when labor disputes break out into violence, and unfortunately we see a loss of life. But we also have to be concerned when the basic rights of workers aren't protected on the shop floor as well.
You know, doing background on you, I also noted that
don't tell me you've been Googling that.
I have been. You mentioned, I think in one of the other interviews that you did, that you considered strike action as, quote unquote, the nuclear option. Why is that? Is it because you believe that based on what has happened in your system, such labor practices could be disrupted?
I think that you're referring to an interview that I gave to the Financial Times, and in that conversation, I was very clear that, again, the rights of workers need to be protected. Workers and the labor movement played a critical role here in South Africa during the anti-apartheid movement and during the struggle for liberation, when the ANC and other political parties were completely banned, and labor was the only vehicle to give expression to the collective aspirations of black South Africans. Labor played an important role and continues to play an important role in this society. However, I think that just as we learned the hard way in the United States, if there isn't a space for good faith, transparent negotiation and conversation that encompasses the deep needs of workers, but also takes into consideration the fact that work now is more shaped by technology, and globalization than it is by some of the ideological differences that exist in the collective bargaining table. If we don't account for that, and if we don't understand how competition is shaped abroad, particularly in the Asian markets, then industry will wane here, and that will be hugely problematic for a union worker who, on average, supports not only their immediate family, but a broad extended family as well. I wouldn't expect you to present China's involvement as a zero-sum game or just some stark competition with the United States.
Trade between the United States and sub-Saharan Africa accounted for $72 billion in 2012, with the US exporting goods worth almost $23 billion. Imports totaled almost $50 billion. South Africa enjoyed the lion's share of this, $22 billion in 2011, with growth on the horizon. More than a third of US exports to sub-Saharan Africa goes to South Africa.
Maybe young people here can do.
While the USA is still Africa's largest trading partner, many have begun to look east to China for new economic opportunities. But will the new hegemon unseat the US in Africa? What has been interesting in the past decade has been the increasing or growing footprint of countries like China, particularly on the African continent. Is this a concern for the United States? And does this make your mission here somewhat differently? And I put it within the context of the BRICS initiative, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, of course, South Africa, that this country's part of.
Now, come on, Chris, you're a scholar. I wouldn't expect you to present China's involvement as a zero-sum game or just some stark competition with the United States. I think that it is a very good thing that we've seen the kind of expansion that's occurred in the Chinese economy over the last 10 years, because that economic expansion also comes with liberalization in their society and more freedoms for workers and the average person in their societies, and that's altogether a good thing. And if the expansion in their economies has resulted in resources that are now available for infrastructure development and investment in Africa, I say hooray, let's cheer that on. When President Obama was here, he was asked that very same question at a town hall meeting. I'm sure you heard his response, and he said, this is not a question of competition, and if countries like South Africa are receiving that level of investment, that's a good thing. We just need to make certain that Africans and South Africans are benefiting from that investment, and it's not an extractive relationship. So we think it's a good thing, and it creates more opportunity.
But at the very same time, what we'll also see...
You're going to persist in this, aren't you, Chris?
What we'll also see is China that is providing economic assistance, in many instances development assistance, without the sort of conditionality that we've seen in US policy around democratization, governance, human rights, etc. So it does provide an alternative to other countries who would like to do that.
I'm not sure about that, because there's growing movement towards democracy here on the African continent. If you look at what's happened, we've got a strengthened AU, and if you look at where Africa is today compared to 10 years ago, look at year by year, you've seen an increase in the number of democratic elections that are held in African countries. So the path to power, no matter what your ideology is, increasingly is through the ballot box in Africa, and that is a good thing. And fortunately for us, you talk about the lessened demands that come from China or elsewhere. Fortunately for us, the United States and South Africa have common values. We share purpose. So though sometimes we may quibble on tactics, at the end of the day, we are pulling in the same direction and have the same expectations for those who are doing business in our countries, who are investing in our countries, and those who we're looking to partner with.
Now, when we talk of good governance and democratization, one of the challenges in the relationship has been in the approach by South Africa towards the International Criminal Court and indeed that of the United States. The United States not being a signatory of the Rome Statute, yet insisting in many instances for African countries, including South Africa, to adhere to the rule of law. Indeed, international law. Isn't that a contradiction?
Well, no, actually, I see no contradiction, and we've been absolutely clear about the right that countries have to their sovereign pursuit of justice and the right they have to create their own infrastructures of accountability and redress. And South Africa and the United States both agree that there's a need to adjudicate instances of corruption or oppression against your own citizenry. So there isn't any disagreement there at all, and we've continued to say that each country needs to make its own decisions about their participation in some of these international bodies. However, we're again supportive of the same value sets and are determined to see the same outcomes as it relates to justice.
Now, as we begin to conclude, Mr. Ambassador, when you look at the relationship...
When you call me that, I always think of really tough questions coming, Chris.
Only tough questions here on Africa 360, Ambassador. When you're looking at your tenure here as Ambassador, what are the key priorities that you'll be looking into in enhancing this relationship, of course, with South Africa, but broadly speaking, with the African continent?
Well, I think that it has to hinge on economic development. I talked earlier about all we've got to do, U.S. and South Africa together, to lower barriers of trade between African countries. That is, we're at a point of inflection, and this is a moment for us to push forward on those policies. There's an opening that we must take advantage of now, and of course, as the world increasingly becomes concerned about disparities, as we look at the Gini coefficient that exists here in South Africa, we've got to do all that we can to roll up our sleeves and create opportunities for entrepreneurialism and innovation for young people that will create job opportunities and its own kind of freedom. There's democratic freedom that exists here in South Africa, and we've got to do all that we can to grow that and to increase economic liberation as well.
Mm-hmm. You know, they say someone like you would definitely have the inside track into what might be coming up in the macro policy towards Africa, particularly from the Obama administration. Can we anticipate maybe some big initiative towards Africa, particularly in President Obama's second term? Is there something big going to happen? Can you anticipate that?
Something actually huge was announced while President Obama was here in Africa. He talked about the Power Africa initiative, which is of tremendous importance right now. And when you consider the percentage of Africans who have access to reliable power, when you consider what the cost of that power is, the President's initiative on that front is one that's transformative and will create just a different space and a different moment here in Africa. And South Africa, given its role as a consumer of energy, and given the fact that there are far too many rural communities here that still lack that reliable power, will be beneficiaries of this as well. So, Chris, I know you were there for that announcement. That's a pretty significant marker that our president has thrown down.
What I was alluding
you want
to
more, don't you?
Was, as usual, what I was alluding to was, can we expect anything like maybe a Marshall Plan for Africa?
Look,
coming from this president that you represent?
I'm not going to get ahead of my president. You know that he's invited African leaders to a summit in Washington, D.C. In August of this year. You can trust that there are some initiatives that President Obama and the U.S. government will be laying down in that conversation. This is a partnership that I know African leaders will take full advantage of.
Ambassador Gaspard, it's been a privilege talking to you, sir, and we wish you the best during your time here in South Africa.
Thank you, and I hope you'll have me on again someday.
We look forward to that, sir. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Many thanks to Ambassador Patrick Gaspard for joining us on our program. We wish him all the best as he begins his journey as America's representative in South Africa. What do you think about America's role on the African continent? Do tell us via Facebook or tweet us at Africa360_eNCA or send us an email at Africa360@enca.com. So until next time, when we look forward to bringing you Africa like you've never seen it before, do take care.